Good evening, Doctor and my friends. Today we are taking a trip back in time to look at some very strange and deadly moments in history. The things that people blame on curse, magic, or even demons. And we are now going to explore how science can help us uncover the truth behind this mysterious event that I'm sure many of you might have heard of. And presenting to you our topic of the day, uncovering the past deadly legacy. Here are our members. We have Li Meishui, Tan Yipei, Li Zixuan, Su Enling, and me, Fu Tongling. Well, let's take a closer look at our first case, which is the deadly ergot poisoning, also known as ergotism. Well, debunking the first myth, Stan Anthony fire. Let me take you back to the year 1095, which is in the medieval France. There's a nobleman named Gaston of Belarus, and he was desperate because his son had been struck by a very horrifying illness where his limbs were swollen and then experiencing violent burning pain, and there is no doctor that could help him. And with nowhere else to turn, Gaston brought his suffering son to a nearby church, which is known for housing relics of Saint Anthony, which is famous to resist the devils through prayer and discipline. And then after visiting the church, miracle happened, in which after touching the relics, Gaston's son suddenly healed. And then after healed, the word spread quickly, where people believe that the healing was divine and it is a blessing from Saint Anthony himself. So, this disease came to be known as San Anthony fire, which is a name that captured from the violent pain that the victims endured. And it wasn't just Gaston's son. By the 10th of century, tens of thousands, which is over 60,000 of people in the Sultan of France, had also perished from this so-called holy fire, which is San Anthony fire, where the victims suffer not only in the burning limbs, but also muscle spasm, convulsions, and also hallucinations. But Saint Anthony fires wasn't the only time in history where mysterious symptoms had led to supernatural explanation. There is another myth about occultism, which is now explaining the second myth about ergot poisoning, which happened in 1500 1518, in which the Europe witnessed outbreaks of strange and terrifying phenomenon known as the dancing plague. In this case, groups of people, which is dozens and even hundreds of people, suddenly broke into uncontrollable dancing, convulsing in the streets for days and to the end, where some people danced themselves to exhaustion, injury, and even to death. And this incident is very mysterious where no one could explain it. Was it actually a curse or is it just a mass hysteria? There is one theory proposed by researchers in 1990 saying that there is a link to ergot poisoning. The convulsions, hallucination, and irrational behavior are similar to what we now know as convulsive ergotism. And actually, the connection doesn't stop here only. Moving on to 1692, in which in a small town of Salem, Massachusetts, there is a group of young girls began showing strange symptoms like convulsion, visions, and fits of screaming and delusions. And bewitchment is blamed to be the reason of such strange behaviors. The townspeople believe that there were victims of the witchcraft in which the infamous Salem witch trials begin now. So in this witch trial, around 21 people were executed and many more others were imprisoned. And this is the event that left a permanent scar on American history, which is a dark history of America. After all, I think most of you guys have already noticed the symptoms by now. I know you must be thinking that maybe it's like a possession. They all experience signs like convulsion, paranoia, hallucination, and it looks scary, right? So imagine this. You are living in a small village centuries ago, and one day, people around you start to twitching, shaking, uncontrollably and even seeing things that are not there. Others will scream in pain, and then their fingers and even toes will turn black and shrivel up, drop off, and it feels like the world has gone mad or even cursed. Well, so alcoholism manifests in two types, in which convulsive and gangrenous type. Firstly, there is one type which is called convulsive type. There is studies linked to dancing plague in 1518 where the villagers danced to exhaustion and death. So this type of ergot poisoning is actually messing with your brain, where the victims will feel pins and needles, and they may experience headache, twitch uncontrollably, and sometimes they can fall into violent seizures. They even shout nonsense, like they can see strange visions, they behave like they are possessed. That's why written here paranoia and also hallucination. And no wonder why people in the past they were taught that it is a witchcraft or even the demons. And then there's another type, which is called gangrenous type, in which it is even scarier, where the study linked to St. Anthony fire in 1095, where the victims will experience symptoms like fire burning at their limbs, which is similar to fire sensation. So in this version of ergotism, it will block the blood flow to arms, legs, fingers, and your toes. That's why victims will feel a very fiery pain and as if their limbs were burning. And their extremity, which is hands and feet, will also feel somewhat cold. Over time, the skin will turn black and then the flesh will starting to dry out, mummify, and even in some case, the limb will just fall off. It's scary, right? So what was the real culprit that is behind all of these mysterious symptoms, hallucination, and historical tragedies? Well, actually, all of these are from a simple slice of bread. So back then, no one suspected the grain itself. But now, with science, we know it was a tiny fungus with a deadly legacy. So the culprit is fungus, which is called Claviceps purpurea, commonly known as the ergot fungus. So when the ripe plant flower, which is airborne spores from the Claviceps purpurea, they land on the ground, and also when it land on the ground, it will infect the flower, and then the fungus will then produce a very yellow, sugary slime, which is full of the spores, which is like gooey material. So the glue will attract insects, and the insects, when it comes, it will spread to other fungus, the fungus to other flowers, and when the dangerous part is that instead of forming normal grain, the infected flower will actually develop into a very hard, dark sclerotum, which is known as the ergot. So this ergot contain toxic compound called ergot alkaloid. When this sclerota accidentally hovers along with healthy grain, they will get round into the flour and bake into bread, as you can see in the picture here. And that's why humans ended up ingesting the poison leading to a condition known as ergotism. Okay, well, now you might think that ergot poisoning was just a relic of the past where something is confined in the medieval of the Europe. But no, actually, ergotism is not just in the ancients. In fact, in the past few decades alone, there have been confirmed cases break out in the world, which happened in India, Ethiopia, Australia, and also United States and Brazil. This modern outbreak mostly occur in developing countries where the food monitoring system may not be strong enough to detect the contamination on time. So this shows that the algorithm is not just a historical, but it's actually a real modern food safety issues that can continue and to affect the vulnerable populations when conditions allow the fungus to thrive. Well, well, most of the prevention work happens in farm and in food production. There are actually still a few things that individuals can do to stay safe, especially in areas where ergot contamination is at risk. Firstly, individuals like us, we can buy grains and flour from trusted and regulated sources, especially if you are in a rural or even developing area. And we should also avoid eating moldy or discolored bread or grain products. So when you see such moldy bread, you can just throw it up without any doubt. And if you are growing your own grains, you can also inspect your crops for any black, hard, ergot bodies that will look like a little claw sticking out of the grain. So most importantly, you have to be aware of this ergotism. Well, although ergotism isn't common today, but in the right condition, actually it can still happen, especially in the places that is having poor grain storage or even food inspection system. For some people, the problem might resolve in 10 days. But if you have prolonged use of the ergot-based drug, the discipline of the symptoms may take up to several months. So we must know that being informed about ergotism is the first step to be safe. I hope that all of you have learned something new about the ergot poisoning, and uh, that's all for my presentation on ergot poisoning. And is there any questions that you guys have you guys have anything to ask, feel free to ask. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question actually. So, are there any benefits of ergot?
Oh, thank you for your questions, Anne. The benefits of ergot, actually, yes, there is some medication that is actually derived from ergot itself, which is called ergot alkaloids as the active material ingredient. For example, ergotamine. Ergotamine is one of the medication that is used to treat the migraines, and there is also other derivative of ergot alkaloids that is used to control like postpartum bleeding. However, since the toxicity is very high, so always we have to purify and also control the dosage in order to avoid toxicity in administering the medication. So it is actually also dangerous in the wild. So this medicine are usually controlled medicine. Yeah, so that's for my answer. Thank you.
Actually, I have another question for you. So, can ergot poisoning affect animals too?
Thank you for your question, Mission. So, yes, actually, ergot poisoning can also affect animal besides human. The animal that usually affected by this poisoning is livestock, such as cattle, sheep, horse, and they can be affected when they eat the contaminated grains or grasses, just like human. So, the symptoms that they might show are lameness and also gangrenes in the limbs and nervous system issue similar to human. And that's why farmers have to also be careful with their animal feeds too. Yeah, that's it for this question.
Only may I know, is there any drugs that can be used to treat ergotism?
Yes, thank you, Pei, for your question. So there's actually don't have such a single specific antidote for alcoholism, but there's also some treatment that can be used to like treat symptomically to improve and also manage the blood flow. For example, like we can give vasodilator like nicotinic acid to improve our blood circulation to prevent the vessel constriction caused by alcoholism, and also anticoagulants such as heparin that can be used to reduce the blood clot risk due to the poisoning, and also pain relievers to prevent the burning sensation uh, to be overly traumatizing the patients. And sometimes we can also use anticonvulsion if the patient is experiencing convulsive symptoms in the neurological form of the ergotism. Yeah, so these are the possible treatment that can be used. Thank you, Ipe. So now I will passing the session to Suen to continue her presentation on rabies.
Okay, thank you, Tong Li. So today I invite Okay, so today I invite you to take a step back in time with me, back to a world where a single bite could mean a slow, terrifying death, a world where the word rabies struck fear into entire community. In many villages, life moves with the rhythm of animals and people living side by side. The sound of chickens clucking, goats bleating, and dogs barking is part of the background of daily life. Children growing up chasing chickens through the yard, laughing as they scatter, they help their parents feed the goats and cows, toss leftover rice to the ducks, and call out to neighborhood dogs like old friends. These animals are not just pets, they are part of the family. For many of us, they are protectors, companions, and part of a childhood memory. We don't usually think of danger when we see a dog resting in the shade or when a child pats its head and smiles. After all, we know this animal. Maybe it grew up in the same yard, maybe it's always been gentle, so when it walks quietly around the home or follows a child, we don't feel fear, we feel safe. But sometimes an animal, even one we know, can change. Without warning, the dog that once wagged its tail begins to growl, bark, or even bite. It stares with strange eyes. That is the deadly legacy of rabies. Imagine walking home alone at night. The streets are empty and the full moon hangs low and heavy in the sky. The air is too still, almost unnatural. Somewhere in the distance, you hear a dog howl, not the playful bark of a pet, but a deep, broken sound and filled with something you can't quite explain. You tell yourself it's nothing, just a dog, just the night, but your steps quicken anyway. Some old part of you, buried deep in instinct, stirs with a quiet alarm. You feel it, something isn't right. Long ago, people listened to that fear. They believed that the full moon had the power to change the very nature of creatures. Dogs that had once been loyal companions would suddenly growl and foam at the mouth. Their bodies red with rage, they would snap at their owners, turn on their families. In the absence of science, there was only imagination to explain it. And so the stories began. Whispers of men transforming into beasts, under the light of the full moon, tales of the werewolf, cursed, hunted, feared. Creatures no longer fully man, no longer fully animal. The line between reality and nightmare blurred, and people locked their doors and prayed that they would not be the next to fall victim to the madness that prowled in the darkness. And also, in the past, people didn't know what caused rabies. They didn't know about viruses or how they spread. So when a dog suddenly went mad, biting people, foaming at the mouth, acting like a monster, they believed it was something much deeper, something sent by the gods. That was the divine punishment. In ancient places like Egypt and Greece, many believed that if someone was bitten by a mad dog, it was a sign they had committed a hidden sin. Maybe they had made the gods angry or broken a sacred rule. The bite wasn't just an accident, it was seen as a punishment from the heaven. So people went to temples, they offered prayers, burned incense, even made sacrifices, hoping for healing, but none of it worked. Once the symptom began, nothing could stop what came next. The person would feel a strange fear of water, their throat would tighten, and they couldn't swallow. Even the sound of water made them panic. Soon, their mind would grow wild. They would scream, shout, attack others. And when the disease took over completely, they would die. No medicine, no prayer, just death. In the medieval of Europe, when people didn't understand how diseases work, rabies created a lot of fear and confusion. Those infected didn't just get sick, they changed in terrifying ways. They became pale and cold, avoided water, and were afraid of bright lights. Some even acted strange around religious objects like crosses or mirrors. They were believed to be vampires. In their madness, they would sometimes bite other people, and to villagers, this looked like something out of a nightmare. They believed those people were no longer human, and they had turned into vampires. The idea of a person spreading a curse through a bite came from a real symptom of rabies. People thought the dead were rising and coming back to harm the living. So they reopened the graves, drove stakes into bodies, and performed rituals to stop the curse. In truth, these weren't monsters. They were just victims of a deadly disease that people simply didn't understand yet. So you might wonder, who's responsible for rabies? Today we know the truth. Rabies is not the work of angry gods or pull of the moon. It is a virus, a microscopic, invisible, slipping through the body with precision. It travels silently through the nerves, inching towards the brain, hijacking everything along the way. It strips away the mind control, unleashing violence, confusion, and terror. And once the symptoms appear, it is almost always too late. So rabies is a deadly disease. It is not a curse, it is not a magic. It is caused by a virus called Lassa virus. Rabies is a very dangerous disease that affects the brain and nervous system of both humans and animals. It is caused by the virus, which is a very tiny germ that we cannot see with our eyes. The rabies virus lives in the saliva of infected animals, especially dogs, but also cats, bats, foxes, and other wild animals. The disease spreads when one of these infected animals bites, scratches, or licks a person, especially if the saliva touches a cut or an open wound, or even the eye or mouth. So once the virus gets into the body, it doesn't attach right away. Instead, it slowly travels through the nerves, heading toward the brain. When the virus reaches the brain and the person begins to feel very sick, this can take days or even weeks, depending on where the bite happened. So when a person is infected with rabies, the virus first travels slowly through the nerves and toward the brain. At first, the person may feel like they have the flu with signs like fever, headache, tiredness, and pain, or even tingling at the spot where they were bitten. As the virus reaches the brain, more serious symptoms begin. The person may feel scared of water and unable to swallow. This is called fear of water, and they may produce too much saliva, having muscle spasm, or start shaking. Some people become very aggressive, angry, or confused. They may shout, run around, or act like someone else. Others might see or hear things that aren't real, which is called hallucination. As the disease gets worse, the person may lose the ability to move, fall into coma, and eventually die. These signs usually will appear days or even weeks after the bite. But once they start, the disease is almost always fatal. That's why it's important to get treatment before these symptoms begin. Diagnosing rabies in people is very difficult because there is no simple test that can confirm it right away, especially because symptoms appear. In many cases, doctors have to look at the patient's symptoms, ask about recent animal bites or contact, and observe the person's behavior. Once symptoms begin, like confusion, fear of water, or aggression, the disease is usually very advanced. In special laboratories, rabies can be confirmed using tests on saliva, blood, spinal fluid, or even skin samples. But these tests are not always available in rural or small health centers. That's why rabies is often diagnosed based on signs, symptoms, and the person's history of animal exposure. Because rabies is so dangerous, doctors doesn't usually wait for test result to start treatment. If someone was bitten by a possibly rabid animal, they start giving the rabies vaccine immediately to stop the virus before it reaches the brain. Rabies can be deadly, but the good news is that it's 100% preventable if we act fast. The rabies vaccine is a powerful tool that can protect people from dying of rabies if they are bitten or scratched by an infected animal. The rabies vaccine is a powerful tool that can protect people from dying of rabies if they are bitten. After a bite, it's very important to wash the wound with soap and water and go to a clinic immediately. There, the person will get a series of injections called post-exposure prophylaxis. These vaccine shots help the body fight off the virus before it reaches the brain, where it becomes deadly. In some serious case, a second medicine called rabies immunoglobulin is also given. It's important to get all the required doses. Even missing one can be dangerous. People who are more at risk, such as farmers, animal workers, or people who live near forests, can also get the vaccine before any bite happens. This is called pre-exposure vaccination. And just as important, dogs, cats, and other pets should be vaccinated regularly so they don't spread rabies to humans. Another simple but important way is to protect yourself from rabies is to avoid touching wild or unfamiliar animals. Even if a dog, cat, or monkey seems friendly or doesn't look sick, it could still carry the virus. Remember, rabies can hide in an animal's body before any symptoms appear. It's better to stay safe than to take a risk. So today we've learned that rabies is dangerous, but it's also something we can prevent. It starts with knowing the signs, protecting ourselves, and acting fast after a bite or scratch. No one should lose their life to something we know how to stop. So let's remember, avoid risky animals, wash wounds, and immediately get to the clinic without delay. Most importantly, let's spread what we have learned to our families, our friends, and our communities. Because the more people know, the more lives we can save. Rabies is real, but with knowledge, courage, and quick action, we can defeat it. Thank you for listening and stay safe. So I'm uh, opening up the floor to any questions.
The presentation is very interesting. May I know how is the rabies evade the immune response during early infection?
Okay, thank you, Zishen, for your question. So rabies virus avoids immune detection by remaining localized in the muscle tissue, initially where immune surveillance is low. It also suppresses local interferon responses and travels via the neurons without entering the bloodstream, and so delaying the immune activation.
And thank you for your answer.
Hi, Sue-Ann. I have a question. I am interested to know, like, what is the pathogenesis of rabies virus in human body?
Okay, thank you, Tong Li, for your question. After entry through a bite or scratch, the rabies virus will replicate in the muscle cell near the wound. So it enters through the nerves and then through the receptor at the junction area. The virus then will travel through the nervous system to the central nervous system where our brain lies, leading to brain inflammation. So from the brain, it spreads to the salivary gland and other organs, and thus it will facilitate the transmission of rabies.
No, understand. Thank you so much for your answer.
Hi, Sue. So one last question for you. May I know what's the difference between furious and paralytic rabies?
Okay, thank you, Mei Xuan. Rabies is the furious rabies is characterized by hyperactivity, fear of water, aggression, and hallucination, while the paralytic rabies involves progressive muscle weakness, whereby we cannot even stand, starting at the site of the bite, leading to paralysis and coma without dramatic behavioral symptoms. The paralytic form is often misdiagnosed due to the presentation.
Understand, Sue. Thank you.
Okay, that's all for my presentation. I'll pass to the next presenter.
Okay, so now let's start with an imagination. Before I start to talk about leprosy, imagine this. You are walking down a street and you hear a bell ringing. People start running away. You look and see a person walking toward you, and they are wearing a dark cloth, and their skin is marked with strange patches. They are carrying the bell. So this is the story of leprosy, a disease that caused fear and misunderstanding for thousands of years. Today, we are going to explore the truth behind leprosy. We will uncover its history, the myths, and how science has changed everything. So let's get started. Leprosy has been known for a very long time, and the first sign of it was found in ancient records from India and Egypt over 4,000 years ago. It spread through the world over time, showing up in many countries by the Middle Age, and leprosy was everywhere in Europe. People thought it was something they could not control, and they didn't understand it. There were hospitals built just for people with leprosy, and many people with the disease were forced to live in these places far away from everyone else. The fear of leprosy was so strong that it spread even faster than the disease itself. People had no idea how it worked, so they believed in all kinds of terrible myths about it. Now, let's talk about those myths. The first myth, punishment from God. For a long time, people believed that leprosy was a punishment from God, a way of saying that someone has done something that is very wrong. If you had leprosy, you were thought to be cursed. Many people, especially in traditional or rural communities, believe that leprosy is a spiritual punishment sent by a high power in response to wrongdoing or sin. This belief can lead to a deep shame for the person affected and even for their family, causing them to be rejected or avoided by others. Religious or cultural interpretations may label the disease as a curse, making it difficult for individuals to seek health treatment. People also believe that leprosy would make your fingers and toes fall off. This made everyone terrified. People often think of leprosy as a flesh-eating disease where visible deformities are inevitable and irreversible. This frightening image is widely portrayed in stories and media, leading to the belief that disfigurement is the natural and unavoidable result of the disease. They thought that just touching someone with leprosy could make you sick too. There is a widespread belief that leprosy can easily spread through simple or casual contact, such as shaking hands, sharing food, sitting beside someone, or touching clothes used by a person with leprosy. This fear can lead to extreme social distancing, isolation of affected individuals, or even expulsion from homes or communities based on the idea that any contact at all is dangerous. These stories were scary, but they also led to terrible treatment of people with the disease. Many people who had leprosy suffer more from they were treated than from the disease itself. Let's move on to the cultural impact. The myth about leprosy affected more than just people's health. They changed how people saw right and wrong, purity, and punishment. People with leprosy were isolated, and they could not live with their families or even stay in their homes. In some places, people who had leprosy were forced to live on separate islands, far away from everyone else, and in some cultures, the word leper was used to describe someone who was shunned or outcast from society. And it wasn't just a disease, it was a label that affected how people live their entire lives. So, what is leprosy? Now, let's uncover the truth. Leprosy is caused by a germ or bacteria called Mycobacterium leprae. The bacteria lies cooler areas of the body and like the skin and the nerves in the hands and feet. The bacteria spread only with long-term close contact, and the disease is slow symptoms and might not show up for years after a person is infected. It usually starts with patches on the skin that look pale or red, and the person might not feel anything when you touch them. It can also affect the nerve, causing people to lose feeling in their hands and feet. And the amazing thing is that most people cannot catch it. In fact, about 95% of people are naturally protected from leprosy, and it only affects a small number of people. So, what happens to someone who has leprosy? The first sign is usually a patch of skin that does not feel anything. It might look like a light or reddish marks, and as the disease goes on, people might lose feeling in their hands and feet due to permanent nerve damage caused by muscle weakness. Without treatment, the disease can cause disfigurement or problem with the nerve. But don't worry, this is not caused by the disease itself eating away at your body. It's the loss of feeling that causes injuries and problems to go unnoticed. Diagnosing leprosy is not very difficult, and doctors look for the signs and symptoms like skin patches with no feeling or thickened nerves. Sometimes they take a small sample of skin to check for the bacteria. Early diagnosis is very important because it stops the disease from spreading and helps the person get the treatment they need. The good news is that leprosy is curable, and the most important step is catching it early. If someone shows symptoms like light or dark patches on the skin that feel numb or tingling in the hands or feet, getting checked quickly is the key. This treatment is called multi-drug therapy, MDT. And once the treatment starts, people are no longer contagious, and after a while, they start to feel better. And the World Health Organization even gives these medicines for free to anyone who needs them. If treated early, leprosy does not cause a long-term problem, but without treatment, it can cause serious damage over time. Did you know that leprosy, once feared as a curse or punishment, is not only curable but also preventable? So for many years, people believed leprosy was highly contagious and untreatable. But today, we know that it spreads slowly and can be controlled and stopped by its own track with the right approach. Next, we focus on the people who close to the patient and family members and those who live in the same household. These people should be checked regularly for signs of disease. In some places, health workers now give a single preventive antibiotic known as rifampicin to protect those at risk. The medicine is free and reduces the chance of developing leprosy by more than 50%. It's a simple but powerful way to protect families. The second is public health education. We all know that knowledge is power, and educating communities help people understanding the disease, recognizing symptoms early, and remove fear. Many people delay seeking help because they are afraid of being judged. That's why public talks, school sessions, posters, and even local radio programs are essential tools. And when people know the facts, they are more likely to take action and less likely to spread the disease. Even though leprosy does not spread through close long-term contact by dirt or bad habits, but maintaining a clean living condition and ensuring a good hygiene can help protect your health. A strong immune system means your body is better at fighting off infection, and simple steps like eating well, living in less crowded homes, and keeping clean all contribute to disease prevention. Now, let's conclude it. Leprosy is a disease that has been misunderstood for thousands of years, but now we know it's a bacterial infection, not a curse. People with leprosy don't need to be afraid of shame. They need to be treated just like anyone else with disease. So next time you hear about leprosy, remember it's a curable disease and it's time to leave the myth behind. Thank you all for your time and attention. I hope my presentation will help you to understand this disease better. Is there any questions from the floor?
Hello, Zishan. Actually, I have a question. So, why do people affected by leprosy often face discrimination even after being cured?
Thank you for your question, Sue-Ann. The stigma around leprosy is deeply rooted in centuries-old myths, religious beliefs, and visible symptoms, which historically made people fear the disease. Even after someone is cured, physical changes like scars or deformities may remain, which can trigger fear or rejection. Combating this requires not only medical treatment but also community education and social integration support. I hope that answers your question.
Hi, Zishan. Good presentation, but may I know why is leprosy more common in some region than others?
Hi, Ipei. Thank you for your question. So, leprosy is more common in areas where there are poor healthcare services, poverty, limited health education, and delayed diagnosis. Environmental factors such as overcrowding, malnutrition, and lack of early access to antibiotics contribute to its persistence. It's not about geography itself, but also about systemic health and social inequity. I hope that answers your question, Ipei.
Hi, Tushen. So actually, I also have one more question to ask you, right? May I know if animal can spread leprosy to human?
Hi, Tongli. Thank you for your question. Yes, in rare cases, in the southern United States, armadillos have been known to carry the mycobacterial leprae bacteria and transmit to humans through direct contact. However, such cases are extremely rare, and transmission from animal is not a major global cause of the disease. I hope you all can understand my answer. Thank you for your question, and that's all for my presentation. And I will pass to the next presenter.
Thank you, Zishan. So I will continue with the next case with a short story. First, in the harbors, where the ships came in. Then in the villages. Then in the big cities. A strange sickness came from far away in the east. People's skin turned dark, and their bodies piled out in the streets. No one knew what it was. No one knew how it spread. The priest told us, this is a punishment from God for our sins. They said, we were being punished for being too proud, too greedy, too full of desire. This terrible sickness, they said, was God's anger made real. So we walked for miles, barefoot across the land. We hit our backs with waves. We bleed. We cry. We beg God to forgive us. They call us the flagellants. We believe that if we suffered, maybe the world would be saved. But the dying didn't stop. Children still died. Even the priests got sick. Even good, kind people were not saved. Maybe it was not because of sins. Maybe it was not God's anger. But back then, we had no other answers. Now, let's find out what the Black Death really was, how it began, how it spread, and how it changed the world forever. A long time ago, from 1347 to 1351, a terrible sickness called the Black Death spread across Europe. But it didn't start there. It came from Central Asia, maybe somewhere near today's China. The disease traveled through people and goods, moving along trade routes like the Silk Road and by ships. This disease was very deadly. It killed around 25 to 50 million people. That means nearly half of all the people in Europe died during this time. Back then, people didn't understand what caused sickness. They made guesses based on what they believed. One idea was the bad air belief. People thought that smelly air caused the disease, so they carried sweet-smelling herbs or wore strong big masks, hoping it would protect them, like how we use face masks today. Second, Many people believed the disease was a punishment from God. They thought they had done something wrongly, and some groups even walked around, hitting themselves with whips, hoping this would make God forgive them and stop the disease. Some people also wrongly blamed certain groups, like the Jewish community, saying they had poisoned the water. This was not true at all, but sadly, it led to violence and hurt many innocent people. The Black Death didn't just make people sick, it changed their lives in many big ways. First, many small villages became empty. Imagine going to sleep and waking up to find that everyone in your village was gone. People were buried in big groups because there were so many deaths. Also, because so many people died, there were not enough workers. The people who survived could ask for better pay and better treatment. This slowly broke the old way of life where poor people worked for rich landowners and helped start a new time called the Renaissance, which is a period of learning and change. Later on, people discovered what really caused the Black Death. In 1894, a man named Alexander Yersin went to Hong Kong where another outbreak happened. He studied sick people and dead rats under a microscope and found a small germ that caused the disease. That germ was later named Yersinia pestis after him. The Black Death showed up in three main ways. First is a bubonic plague. This was the most common one. People got a high fever, felt very cold, and had painful swollen spots under their arms or near their groin. Sometimes their skin turned dark, which is why it was called the Black Death. Second is the pneumonic plague. This attacked the lungs. People would cough a lot, even cough up blood, and have trouble in breathing. It could kill a person very quickly, like within a few days. Lastly is the septicemic plague. This was the deadliest. The germs got into the blood. People would feel stomach pain, throw up, and sometimes bleed under the skin. This type could just kill in one day. The germ that caused the Black Death usually lives in rats. Fleas that bite these rats can carry the germs and then bite humans. That is how the disease spreads. In old times, cities were crowded and dirty, which made it easy for the disease to pass from one person to another one. One kind of the plague could even spread through cough and sneezes, making it much more dangerous. Back in the old days, doctors could only guess someone had the Black Death by looking at their symptoms, like a high fever and swollen bumps. They didn't have microscope or lab tests, so they didn't really know the exact cause. Today, doctors can take blood samples and use machines to check for the germ that caused the plague. This helped them give the right treatment quickly. In the Middle Age, people didn't have the real medicine for the plague. They tried using plants, cutting the skin to remove bad blood, or saying prayers. But none of this really worked. Today, the disease can be treated with strong medicine called antibiotics. If someone gets sick early and take medicine quickly, they can survive. To stop the disease from spreading, people now try to keep rats and fleas away and watch closely in places where the plague still happens, like some areas in Madagascar and the USA. Today, we know the Black Death primarily transmitted through the bites of infected fleas carried by rodents. To prevent plague outbreaks, public health strategies focus on controlling rodent populations, especially in rural areas, using insect repellent and wearing protective clothing to avoid flea bites, maintaining good sanitation, and avoiding contact with wild animals. Early diagnosis and antibiotic treatment, which can prevent severe illness and spread. In high-risk areas, public health officials also monitor animals and fleas for Yersinia pestis to catch outbreak early. In conclusion, the Black Death was not merely an outbreak of a deadly disease. It was a transformative force that reshaped cultural, social, and economic structures across Europe. Today, while we can treat and prevent plague, its legacy reminds us of the enduring impact pandemic can have on society. This was the reality of the Black Death. In reflecting on the Black Death, we are reminded that disease is not just a biological event, but a catalyst that can shift the course of history. The pandemic challenged religious belief, altered rebel systems, restructured feudal hierarchies, and even influenced art and literature in profound ways. It exposed the fragility of human systems and the resilience of community forced to rebuild. Even in modern times, the echoes of the Black Death resonate, especially as we face our own global crisis. It underscores the importance of preparedness, the need for compassion in face of suffering, and the power of collective response. One key reason is also the danger of misinformation. During the Black Death, people often blame minorities or believe false curse. Today, we must learn not to believe in myth or rumors, but to trust science, facts, and health experts. This helps protect not only ourselves, but our whole community. The Black Death is a chapter in history that teaches us both caution and hope. As we close, let us remember that pandemic shaped not only death tolls, but also how society evolved, and that understanding the past is essential to navigating the future. That's all from my presentation. Is there any question from the floor?
Hi, Pei. So I have one question for you. What happened to the empty villages after the Black Death?
Thank you, Meisha, for the question. After the Black Death, many villages became completely empty because so many people died. Some of these places were never lived in again. They were left abandoned and slowly disappeared. Nature took over, plants grew over the houses, and animals moved in. Some of these lost villages can still be found today as grassy fields. Is there any other questions?
I have a question. Thank you for letting us know more about the Black Death. But if the Black Death happened so long ago, can it still come back today?
Interesting question, Suan. Yes, the plague still exists today, but it is very rare and treatable with antibiotics. The bacteria that cause the Black Death, Yersinia pestis, still lives in some wild animals and their fleas, especially in parts of the US, Africa, and Asia. However, modern medicine and better hygiene with quick public health responses help us prevent it from becoming a massive outbreak like in the 14th century. So while it can come back, we are much better prepared now to stop it early.
Hello, Pei. I have a question, and thank you for your presentation. And the presentation is very interesting. So, why did people think the Black Death was a punishment from God?
Good question, Zixuan. So back then, people didn't understand how diseases spread. There were no microscope or science like we have today. So when so many people got sick and died, they believed it must be because they had done something wrong and that God was angry. This was the only explanation they could think of at the time. Am I answering your questions? I think that's all from my presentation. So I will pass the cases to next presenter.
All right, students, let's imagine this. Your classmates suddenly collapse, their body shaking with no warning, no reason. Doesn't that sound scary? Long time ago, people thought that this was magic or demon. They believed that seizures were cursed from angry gods. Hence, they will do crazy things like making potions from ground up skull or do scary exorcism to chase away the evil spirit. However, that's not the truth. Now, let me tell you the real story of epilepsy and why understanding it matters to all of us. 4,000 years ago in Babylon, people wrote about seizures on clay tablets. They got the symptom right, but blamed the angry spirits. Fast forward to ancient Greece. A doctor named Hippocrates said, wait, this isn't magic, it's the brain. But nobody listened. For centuries, treatments were terrifying, from drinking weird potions to violent exorcism, all because people fear what they didn't understand. Finally, in the 19th century, doctors discovered epilepsy is like an electrical storm in the brain. No demon, no curse, just neuron misfiring. This changed everything. But in some villages today, the old fears remain. I've heard stories of family hiding relatives with epilepsy, teacher refusing to let kids with seizures attend school, and also people wasting money on healers instead of real medicine. Despite significant medical advancement, persistent misconception continues to surround epilepsy. Today, I'm going to clear up 3 dangerous myths about epilepsy that many people still believe, especially in rural areas where superstitions run deep. So first, let's tackle the biggest fear. Epilepsy is contagious. Some people avoid touching or helping someone having seizure because they think that they will catch it. That's completely false. Epilepsy is not like a cold or flu. It's a brain condition caused by electrical misfire, not germs. You can't get it from touching, sharing food, or even a blood transfusion. So next time when someone has a seizure, don't be afraid to step up and help. Now, the most dangerous myth of all, you must force a spoon or cloth into their mouth to stop them from swallowing their tongue. Please, never do this. It's a Hollywood lie. The tongue can't be swallowed, but shoving objects in our mouth can choke them or break the teeth. Instead, just roll them gently onto their side, cushion their head, and time the seizure. Simple, safe, and science-backed. Finally, the oldest myth. Epilepsy is caused by evil spirit or curse. Centuries ago, people blamed seizures on demons, but today, we know it better. Epilepsy is a medical condition just like diabetes or asthma. In rural areas, the myth still causes shame, isolation, or even cruel treatments like exorcism. But modern medicine proved epilepsy comes from the brain, not the supernatural. So what is epilepsy? Epilepsy is a neurological condition characterized by recurrent, unprovoked seizures caused by abnormal electrical discharges in the brain. Much like a brief but destructive power surge in complex circuit, this episode temporarily affects the brain function. Globally, epilepsy impacts approximately 50 million individuals across all ages and backgrounds. So for clinical signs, seizures manifest in remarkably different forms. The most recognizable are tonic-clonic seizure, which formerly called grand mal, featuring loss of consciousness and violent muscle contraction. On the other end of the spectrum, absent seizures cause brief lapses in awareness, often just 5 to 10 seconds of staring that may go unnoticed. While for focus seizures, where it started in just one part of the brain and can cause strange feeling like suddenly thinking you have lived for a moment before or having one arm or leg move on its own. About 1 in 3 people with epilepsy get a warning sign before a seizure starts, like smelling something odd or feeling like butterflies in their stomach. So, what causes epilepsy? Epilepsy can stem from multiple causes. These include genetic factor, traumatic brain injuries, stroke, or brain tumors, though in about half of cases, the exact cause remains unknown. To diagnose epilepsy, doctors usually start with a simple brainwave test that tracks the electrical activities and looks for seizures pattern. They might also do a brain scan, such as MRI or CT scan, to check for any physical changes in the brain. But one of the most important tools is the eyewitness account. If you see someone have a seizure, noting details like how long it lasted, what movements you saw, and whether they seemed aware can give doctors vital clues that machines can't detect. So today, epilepsy can be treated in several effective ways. For about 7 out of 10 people, anti-seizure medication provide good control of symptoms. If medicines don't work enough, doctor might suggest surgery or a small device like a pacemaker for the brain that helps to calm seizures. For some children, a carefully planned high-fat, low-carb diet, which is also called ketogenic diet, works surprisingly well when supervised by doctor. Scientists are now working on exciting new treatment too, like gene therapy and smart computer programs that might one day predict and stop seizure before they even happen. So now let's talk about how we can protect our most precious asset, which is our brain. One of the most important ways to prevent epilepsy is by avoiding traumatic brain injury. Your brain is soft like tofu, located inside your heart skull. Even one bad hit can cause damage that lead to epilepsy years later. So how do we protect it? First, always wear a helmet when riding bicycle, motorcycle, or playing rough sport like rugby. Besides, always remember to buckle up your seatbelt when driving or riding in a vehicle. Never drink alcohol or use drugs. They will slow down your reaction and cause accidents. And listen, walk away from fights, as one punch can destroy someone's future by harming their brain. Second, let's talk about preventing stroke. A stroke happens when blood stops flowing to part of your brain, and this can trigger epilepsy. Even young people can have strokes if they don't take care of their bodies. Choose to eat fresh food like vegetable, beans, and fruits instead of junk food which are full of oil and salt. Next, it is important to have healthy and active lifestyle by exercising, jogging, or playing sports, and avoid alcohol completely. It's not just about behaving well. Alcohol weakens your blood vessel and can lead to bleeding in the brain. A healthy body means a healthy brain. Finally, cleanliness saves the brain. Many cases of epilepsy start with infection from dirty hands, unclean water, or undercooked food. So wash your hand with soap after using the toilet and before eating. These simple habits kill germs that could harm your brain. Always drink boiled, filtered, or treated water to avoid parasites. When cooking pork or other meat, make sure it's fully cooked to kill tapeworm egg. If these eggs get into your body, they can travel to the brain and cause seizure. A few minutes of proper cooking can prevent a lifetime problem. So in conclusion, the history of epilepsy reflects humanity's remarkable journey from superstition to science, from ancient skull potion to today's neural implant and AI-driven therapies. While we made extraordinary progress, the work continues. Each of us has a role to play by dispelling harmful myths, advocating for research funding, and mastering basic seizures first aid. We contribute to a future where epilepsy no longer limits human potential. Let us transform this legacy of fears into a story of truth, one where scientific understanding replaces stigma and innovation offer hope where once there was only mystery. So that's all for my presentation. Is there any question?
Well, I have a question regarding the topic that you presented just now. So, if epilepsy is caused by brain wiring, so why do some people develop it after infections like malaria or schistosomiasis?
Thank you, Tong Li, for the interesting question. This is because those infections will damage our brain structure. For example, cysticercosis, which is the tapeworm cyst, will scar our brain tissue, creating erratic electrical signals. Hence, the acquired epilepsy proved that why preventing infection is just as important as treating seizures. Is there any more questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Thank you, Michelle, for your presentation. So I was curious, why did the ancient Babylonians think epilepsy was caused by the demons?
Thank you, Sven, for the question. This is because they were still haven't exposed to any scientific knowledge. They saw seizure with the clinical signs of shaking, foaming mouth, and loss of control. And they thought that it was just supernatural. They even label in the clay tablet as it is due to magic, where it can cure it. So, is there any more question?
Hi, Meishan. I would like to ask, Hippocrates said epilepsy was a brain problem, but people ignore him for 2,000 years. May I know why?
Thank you, Ipe, for your question. This is because back then, people trusted myth more than doctors. Without tools like microscope or EEG, which is also known as electroencephalogram, Hippocrates' idea seems to be a bit crazy. Years later, modern technology has proved that he was right all along. So that's all for our presentation. Thank you. So these are our references. Okay. All right. Thank you.